I am here today with Tara Gallina. She's the owner of Take Root Hospitality. How are you doing today, Tara?
I am doing well. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you. Well, I'm excited to have you here today. We've had a really good conversation already today, kind of getting ready for the show, and I'm excited to get some of that out of here. But I think to start with, Tara, maybe can you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then maybe we'll jump into a little bit more about Take Root and the operations you have going there in St. Louis.
Sure, yeah. So yeah, I'm Tara Gallina. I am the co-owner of Take Root Hospitality, along with my husband Michael, and then our culinary director partner Aaron Martinez. And we collectively have four restaurants here in St. Louis, starting with Vicia, our first restaurant, which is a seasonal farm to table fine dining establishment. Winslow's Table, which is a bakery, cafe, and gift shop all in one. Taqueria Marita, which is a Southern California Baja style Mexican restaurant, as well as Bistro La Florisson, which is a kind of classic French bistro.
Awesome, awesome. Well, that's a great portfolio. So how long have you owned Take Root in these restaurants?
Yeah, we started as Vicia 5.5 years ago. And it wasn't only until this year when we opened two new restaurants at the same time, the Taqueria and the Bistro, that we decided we really need to kind of call ourselves something now. I guess we're a little more than just a couple restaurants. So we created Take Root Hospitality, and those last two concepts just opened over the summer. So yeah, so it's been a road. Vicia and Winslow's got us through the pandemic, and allowed us to creatively pivot to lead to us to be able to have these new restaurants, which I'm certainly grateful for. But myself personally, I really run the operations of the restaurant group, from human resources and payroll to marketing, creative development, things of that nature, and all the fixing this, fixing that, and anything that possibly needs to get done. So I wear a lot of hats. And I'm currently, as we talked about earlier, just trying to kind of transition to being more of a leadership role, and kind of learning what that means, and not being so involved in the day-to-day management of each restaurant.
So before opening your first restaurant, what were you doing that led you up to that point?
I had been in New York, along with my husband Michael. We met working at a restaurant called Blue Hill at Stone Barns, which is just outside of the city. Really, remarkable farm to table restaurants. And we kind of started our relationship there. And Michael, is from St. Louis, and it's the reason we moved back here to kind of try out our own thing, not really knowing where it was going to go. About 6 years ago, actually no longer, we did a bunch of pop-ups. In between when we moved to St. Louis, and we actually opened Vicia. So we kind of went from that. Before that, I had gone to culinary school at what was the French Culinary Institute. I sort of worked throughout the industry in New York, from magazines to food television to restaurants, kind of trying to figure out where my home was. I knew I wanted to be in food, and I wasn't quite sure what, but it wasn't until I landed an apprenticeship at Blue Hill. Actually, I got to work on the farm. I got to work in hospitality in the front of house, starting from hosting, working my way all the way up to a service captain. And I kind of really fell in love with hospitality, and kind of knew that was my calling, but also wanting to create something special that sort of furthered telling the story of sustainable agriculture, and good food practices. And that's kind of what led Michael and I to bring that idea to St. Louis.
That's awesome. I think it's a great concept. And then to see you go from one restaurant to four restaurants in a very short period of time, that's quite the expansion there.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention that in the middle of that, I also had two kids. So I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old on top of four restaurants. So I'm tired.
I can imagine. I can only
I've got,
imagine it. As if the
yeah,
four
it's
restaurants
wild.
weren't enough, you have two young kids, right?
Yeah, depending on the day is when, like, which one is harder. I'm not sure, but so yeah, so Michael and I have our hands full in every regard, but I I kind of also don't know anything different, and that's just kind of what we do. So this was a year of growth, most definitely. So I'm kind of excited to get into 2023 and to kind of try to find our groove, with this level of operation that we're running.
Yeah. So, I think you keyed in on it there, right? It's a ton of growth. And so in your, in your world, I mean, obviously you're expanding your locations, you're scaling during a very difficult time to scale. And then also obviously you're growing your team in a very difficult time to be able to find, train, and retain talent right now. So how's that going so far?
It depends on the day. With more people come more everything. And, I feel like I don't know that there's been a day in recent memory where, someone hasn't called off here, or we lost someone here, or, we're sort of trying to play, fill in the pieces a little bit of everywhere, or this person's out sick. So, I'm filling in, or Michael's filling in. And, it's a constant, just roller coaster to some regard, as much as we try to keep it organized and plan ahead. Life is unpredictable now more than ever before.
Right.
So hiring and retaining people is literally all we think about and talk about, almost every day. Obviously the food has to be great and shine, but I wish I thought more about that. But these days it seems it's really how to keep them happy, create a good work culture, and be proud of the team that we have.
And I think that's an interesting concept because a lot of people talk about culture, right? And I think everybody's heard difference between corporate culture where it sits on a wall, or in a card in your pocket versus the actual culture that exists kind of in your organization. So, day to day in your restaurants, what kind of culture are you trying to build, within the restaurants?
Yeah, I mean, I think, positivity and openness is number one. And that's something we work at every day. And I feel like some days we do really well, and other days, you take two steps back. But trying to be honest and recognize, when things aren't happening the way they're supposed to, and having those frank conversations to try to turn that around and make people aware of how their actions affect everyone else. So it's taken a long time to kind of get here, and we still have a ways to go. But I think having the dialogue, being open about it, and knowing that it's okay to talk about what isn't working well, I think is the first step. So we're not perfect, and there are some things that go so great and some things that don't. And I think it's just people, when you're dealing with human beings, right, there's just so many variables, and people's emotions, and what people are bringing from their personal life into the workplace every day, and making space for that, making sure that our team doesn't feel like we don't care about what's happening, at home. And if they need help or want to talk about it, we're here. If they don't, just to be able to say, I'm having one of those days, I just need a little space, and allowing for that. And hopefully making people not feel ashamed or afraid to say as much, and I think that's something, as a restaurant culture industry, is just for so many years was sort of shunned, to even talk about that. So a lot of unlearning is happening, right now across all boards, from the kitchens, to the dining rooms. But we're trying to work towards that place where people feel safe and comfortable, all the time, to be at work.
Yeah, and I think that you just hit on something that's really interesting because, I think whether you're working in a restaurant or a hotel or any other facet of hospitality for years, most days start off with whatever baggage you have, leave it outside, right? And I feel like that's definitely shifted where that's not the case anymore, right? I mean, people are bringing their whole selves to work, bringing their authentic selves to work, and with that, not only do you get the benefit of the unique perspective, but you also are getting, everything that comes in with them as
Yeah.
well. So how are you starting to manage that? How are you weeding your way through that so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're trying to instill in our management, that they need to be open and understanding, of team members that are having challenges, keeping open lines of communication. I think from a team member perspective, we want them to feel like if they need a day, or they need this, or they need that, like it's okay, but it's all about communication, and just being transparent with your manager that this is happening, or something is happening, nothing specific, but, so that they understand. When so much goes unsaid, everybody comes to their own conclusions, right? And they make assumptions, and they think they know what's happening, or they think oh, you don't care about your job, or, there's just so much that we sort of just jump to. Whereas now I think you really got to take a step back and think, what, something might be going on here. Let's do a little bit more, fact finding. Let's try to understand. So I think trying to shift that perspective within our management team, so that the team members feel like if they need to call out because they're having, something going on in their personal life, that there isn't going to be retribution, but then you're running a business, right? So you have to find that balance to make sure that the team member, respects everyone else's time too, and that it doesn't become something out of control. So there's no rule book for it. There's no script, so we're just kind of learning as we go. But I think just trying to shift the mindset that it's okay and it's going to happen. So let's not all be surprised, about it when it does.
One of the things that I've seen recently, through a number of articles and videos is this concept of, the team members that are getting burned out largely, it's not just the job, right? In a lot of cases, they are the empathetic ones in the group and kind of the person that everybody talks to. And now they're almost wearing the baggage of everybody else that's coming through simply because they're empathetic, right? And they're a good
Right.
ear and there's somebody to listen to. Are you seeing that at all? Kind of in your world and any of your restaurants?
Sure, sure. I mean, I've had a lot of long talks with team members who are like, oh, I just, like it's just heavy, right? It's heavy when you have to be that person that everybody wants to unload on. And I think, it's good in so many ways, right? That there people feel safe and comfortable talking to people, within their team or to a manager about what's happening. But getting that manager prepared to hear that information and what to do with it is so important. And so I feel like everything kind of should hopefully roll uphill in that regard. And I guess at the end of the day, I have many days, where feel like I'm just got the weight of the world on my shoulders. But then who do I talk to, right? It stops, the buck stops here. So I think I've had some days I can remember where I just felt like, this is just impossible, right? Or, I feel so terrible that this is happening, or, I just feel helpless, or, there's nothing I can do. And that's a terrible feeling, right? But I think that's kind of who I am too. I'm that empathetic person that listens and kind of takes that all on, and I'm learning my own ways to manage that and to deal with it. But I think I want our team in both directions just to feel like that it's okay to talk about those things, and we're not going to use that against you, or not schedule you or anything like that. It's just
Right.
it's not about that. We want to be able to help at the end of the day.
So one of the things you mentioned was, preparing your managers to hear that, right? So what kind of conversations are you having with your managers, as you're getting them ready to deal with really what is the mental health side of the industry at this point in time?
Yeah, I mean, and we're trying to share resources, that are, from a reading perspective, but we also provide free mental health benefits to all of our employees, and that includes, several free counseling sessions that they can access, and then continue to access, as they can afford it, throughout the year if they need more, counseling. And so I think trying to remind everybody, like, hey, have you called there? It's called Provident. Have you called Provident? Have you talked to someone? Like you should just have a quick session, and just get it out there and hear from somebody with a objective perspective, and just making that conversation. I've been pleased to just even hear, even in passing or in a quick message, like, oh, I got to have a quick session with my counselor, and then I'll be available at such time. And I'm like, I'm just glad that that's not like anything people are embarrassed to talk about. So I want to keep hearing that kind of thing. That's why it's there. But making that okay, and knowing that they can talk to me, but they can also talk to somebody else.
I think that's so important, and it's one of the it's definitely one of those underlying themes in our industry, and this was here well before COVID. I mean, mental
Oh,
health was a
most definitely.
massive concern in hospitality well before COVID ever hit. But now I think the pandemic has really put it at the forefront, because mental health has turned into such a universally accepted concern across almost every employer, not just high volume, high stress, high, anxiety like the hospitality industry was. You know, as you're looking ahead, what kind of, as a business owner, what kind of questions do you still have that you're trying to get answered, or looking for help with, that people really, can maybe help you to answer, or can ask themselves and try to find their own resources?
Yeah, I mean, I think like more formal training on how to deal with an employee in crisis is something that I would love to have more access to. I am not trained in any capacity in any space as this regards. I'm just so self-taught. So I'm doing my best to equip my team with resources, but that has its limitations, right? Myself included. So I think it would be wonderful to see some sort of, and I don't know if it's a federal, state level program, but being able to say, hey, here is an online course you can take, to coach an employee, that might be going through something, and feeling like you have some tools, and it's not completely out of your control. I think something like that. I think about how it impacts customer service also, and what the guest experience is like, and not sure whether or not society has accepted the fact that you might go to a place that is half their dining room is closed because they just don't have the staff to support it, and they can make the choice to overseat and give everybody a bad time, or they can say, you know what, we just can only do what we can do. And that has at times because someone's out because they needed a mental health day, and you have to just roll with that. Like you don't really have a lot of other choice. And so or if someone's having a bad day, and that might bleed into their experience with a customer. I always worry about that, but how much are people now taking that instance and saying, oh, well, I'm never going back to that place because XYZ, or, is there any empathy amongst our customers? That's something I think about, and I'm curious from a dining culture, how that changes people, over the next several years.
I think we've all seen the sensationalized stories about, hospitality, or any facet of it where a customer is interacting with a service worker. I think we've all seen horror stories, but what are
Sure.
you seeing? Yeah, what are you seeing on your side? I mean, is it obviously you've got 4 restaurants, you've got a pretty good reach on your business there. I mean, are you seeing the same kind of interactions, or are people starting to have a little bit of empathy as they move forward here?
It's evolved. It sort of, I've seen up and downs, right? I mean, I think, we went from extremes where, everybody was so nice and just over tipping, and everybody was really sensitive to how difficult it was for our industry. And then, when everything kind of ramped back up, people kind of got back to their old ways. And, you saw a little bit of that old, difficult customer coming back to the forefront. But I feel this way anyway. I think more restaurants are feeling the way we are, and we're pushing back on that more than we ever did, and not just yes, of course, whatever you need, if it's unrealistic or if it's just inappropriate, right? So I think that voice has been a little bit stronger, that we gained through the pandemic, which I think is positive. But it just kind of goes back and forth, and I think there will always be those people that are difficult. That's just life. But feeling like we know what to say now, and we know how to politely fire somebody if it's necessary, so those things have changed. But whether or not I think people understand what we're going through now, I think if they are working, they probably recognize it in their own workplace, so I think
Right.
everybody's dealing with it. So I think there is a little more sympathy, we're all strapped. I think what I have found, not related to so much staffing, but it's just the challenges from the cost of everything, right? And everything is more expensive. And for me, yeah, that's somewhat to do with our product, but it's really more to do with what we have to pay our staff. So our costs have increased because our wages have increased, and I'm glad that they have, and I feel good about knowing what all of our team members are making. And making sure it's a livable wage for them, but that costs money, and so you can choose to eat out somewhere that may or may not take care of their people in that way, and you might pay less, but you could eat with us. And I hope you feel good to know that we're making sure that everybody is receiving, a fair wage, if not, much more than that. And so something we did during the pandemic that sort of, I think, was a switch moment for us that I'm super grateful for, is we went to a system now where our front and back of house all share tips. So there is no cooks make, $15 and servers are making $30 an hour. That doesn't exist anymore. And so when we were such a small team and we contracted, and, we were just trying to survive when we were doing takeout and, things like that, we sort of went to that model because it just made sense. And we could never go back. Once you realize like how you were able to level that playing field for everyone, it really changed things. And it was a band-aid that I think I'd always wanted to rip off, but pre-COVID, like there was just so many preconceived opinions and notions about, especially from people who have worked in hospitality, about what they would accept and how much they feel like they're entitled to versus somebody who works in the back of house. So we were able to raise everybody's base wage and then have them share within those tips, and so everybody is starting off on more of a level playing field, which I feel really good about, and I'm proud of. But again, that costs money, right? Making sure our employees have health benefits, free mental health, all of that, like that all costs money, so that impacts the cost of things you see on a menu. And so I think there's more of that, like, well, why is everything so expensive? I'm like, because life, right? But finding a way to communicate to people who are curious about how our business practices are, but without feeling like I'm wearing it on our sleeve, waving it like a flag. Like, I'm trying to brag about it at the same time. So that I'm still kind of figuring that out.
I'm telling you, I got to rewind to something here. So this
Yeah.
tip thing, right? So I think I can I think I can understand what the back of the house team feels about this shift. How is your front of the house team taking that?
I mean, I think we have hired with intention. So like it's not something that we're hiding from anybody. That's a transparent thing that we talk about in the hiring process. So we're trying to find people that want to work in a culture and an environment where they feel like they're a coworker and a teammate with the people that are making the food, right? So it's not for everybody. There's a lot of servers that don't work for us, right? Because that's just not something they're interested in, and they want to go home with their $500 and call it a day. But there's a cost to that. I think
Yeah.
from a society standpoint. So we're trying to create something different and to attract a certain type of person that wants to work in that environment and feel good about it. So I think, has that made it more challenging for us in hiring? Most definitely. But I'm also really pleased with the people we have found and trying to find people who treat this as a profession, not just, a serving job. And so that's been a shift for sure. But I think it also helps set us apart too.
Well, I am absolutely just enthralled with the manner in which you've handled this. I think it seems like a holistic, as you put it, positive culture that you are instilling across your team, not only from what you're instilling to the team, but the way that you hire, the way that you pay, the way that you take care of the team, the way that you empathize with the team. It's absolutely amazing. And I hope anybody who's listening to this is really thinking about their business and how they can start making some of the same decisions, because I feel like this is what needs to happen in hospitality in order for in order for it to be a viable, consistent industry for everybody, not just the few that can figure out how to make it to the other side or take the heat of the crucible, right?
Most definitely, and we're not perfect, and I always want to be careful. Like I'm not preaching, that I've got
Right.
it all figured out. And there's a hard conversation I have almost every day with somebody about something, where I hear it,
Right.
I'm like, like that still happens, it's just, we're trying to have a goal. We're trying to have a focus, and we're trying to all work towards something. And so I think that I'm really proud of. And I think whether we like it or not, as you said, this is where things are headed. So we can either get ahead of it or we can be reactionary to it down the road and feel like we're catching up. But, the younger generation, not to age myself, but like they're coming into this with a whole nother set of expectations for what it means to have a job. What is a job? What does it look like? And I think we can be mad about it and we can be frustrated and we can say, oh, these kids, they don't want to work, or that, but we're not really listening if that's how we feel about it. And we can be angry and then find ourselves without anybody working for us, right? Like we have to evolve, and you have to adapt to who's out there. So those are some things that we've certainly talked with internally. I think most of our leadership, we're in our late 30s, 40s, so we're used to how it was when we started working, and it's different.
Right.
And I think some of it has been for the best, some of it is a bit extreme, but we're finding that middle ground, right? And figuring out how to attract and retain people that have different expectations, and rightfully so, about what it means, to have a good job.
Well, I think that's absolutely awesome. As we kind of wrap up here today, one of the things I always like to ask is, do you have any advice or what kind of advice are you giving to people as as they join your team from a management perspective?
Well, I think thankful that everyone that we sort of have in management has started with us in some sort of entry level capacity, more or less. So they've been able to learn the business, learn what we care about, learn how to prioritize, what's important. And I think I prefer, when at all possible, to promote from within for that reason. But I think we're trying to hopefully teach them, like, we want to do this a better way, and we need you to help with that, right? Like, I can't certainly do it all by myself. My husband can't do it by himself. We need to be able to teach the teachers and have them continue down. And so I think just that, like, this is a professional environment, right? Like, we're not all slinging shots. We're not, it's just not that kind of workplace. Like, which,
Right.
that I'm sure is fun too. But, like, to have people view this as a career, view it as an opportunity to further their life, even if it's just for a 2-year period where they're trying to move on to something, that they're pursuing outside of this industry. Like, we have to make it good while they're here, and so really just trying to come at problems and challenges with that in our perspective. So I think, just my advice, I guess, would just be to think about how to make it a professional environment. And what does that mean? And if you've never worked in one, like, getting advice and talking to people who do, and how do they deal with challenges and crises and conflict, and trying to take some of those lessons. My person I read personally that I'm a big fan of is Brene Brown. And so I would say, just read her book, Dare to Lead, and you will understand.
Absolutely phenomenal book and,
Yeah.
piece of advice and a book to read. That's absolutely awesome. I love it.
Yes, I have it on my desk. I'm looking at it right now. I have lots of dog-eared pages that I go back to, and just, like, teaching myself how to be a better leader. And, so I think anybody, just start there, really.
That's awesome. That is awesome. All right. Well, Tara, as we close today, if people want to find out more about your restaurants, where are they going?
Yes. So we don't quite have a central website yet. That's on a very, very long to-do list that I try to get to every day, right? But we are, we're on Instagram, which is where we love to share, stories about our team and about our food and what we do. So Vicia, Winslow's Table, Taqueria Morita, and Bistro La Florisone. We're in St. Louis. We'd love to see you if you come to town, and to come check out our places. We have a little bit of something for everybody, all kind of focused on exceptional hospitality and well-sourced, delicious food.
Well, Tara, I have really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you so much. And I wish the
You
best
too,
to you
Chris.
on your new restaurants and everything you
Thank
have
you.
going there.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
I appreciate it.
Have a great day.
You too.